My husband brought his mistress to our anniversary dinner and asked me to smile like she was a guest instead of the woman sleeping in my bed when I was out of town. He did it in front of his mother, his sister, 2 cousins, and a photographer he had already paid. Then he touched the small of her back, leaned toward me across a table set for celebration, and said, "Natalie, don't make this ugly." I was 37 years old, sitting in the private dining room of a Charleston restaurant, where the candles cost more than the meal my mother used to make on Sundays. "I wore a navy dress," Grant once said, made me look elegant back when he still noticed me without needing an audience. My name was Natalie Whitaker. I worked as a legal records manager for a medical insurance company, which meant I had spent 13 years learning that the truth usually didn't scream. It sat quietly in timestamps. Grant Whitaker, my husband of 12 years, stood beside Sabrina Wells, like he had rehearsed the angle. She was 32, polished pretty in a way that looked expensive but effortless, with soft blonde waves and a cream silk dress that did not belong at another woman's anniversary dinner. She smiled at me with her lips pressed together, not apologetic, not cruel, exactly just certain. That was worse. She looked like a woman who had already been told the room was hers. Nobody at the table gasped. That was the first thing I noticed. Not his mother Diane, whose pearls rested at her throat like a badge of Southern forgiveness. Not his older sister Marcy, who lifted her wineglass and looked away from me. Not his cousin Paul, who suddenly became very interested in the menu. Their silence told me this was not a mistake, not an awkward surprise, not Grant losing his mind for one reckless minute. This dinner had been planned without me. Grant smiled the way he smiled for clients, half warmth and half command. "Everyone you know, Sabrina," he said like that, softened anything. "She's been helping with the company's rebrand. And with some personal transitions." He said the last words while looking at me. Personal transitions. That was what he called bringing his mistress to our anniversary dinner. Not betrayal, not humiliation, not cruelty. A transition. Men like Grant loved gentle words for violent things. I felt my hand close around the cloth napkin in my lap. It was white, folded into the shape of something fragile and useless. I wanted to stand up. I wanted to ask Diane when she found out. I wanted to ask Sabrina if she had enjoyed the earrings Grant bought with a company card I had helped save from default. I wanted to ask Grant whether 12 years had meant so little that he needed witnesses to erase them. Instead, I breathed in slowly. Grant took the seat at the head of the table. He did not sit beside me. He pulled out the chair to his right for Sabrina, and she sat down with a soft, "Thank you," her perfume sliding across the table like another insult. My chair was at the other end, close enough to be included, far enough to be managed. The arrangement said everything Grant had not yet said aloud. I was still useful as a symbol, but no longer welcome at the center. Diane reached for her glass. "Natalie, sweetheart," she said, using that careful tone people use when they have already chosen the person they will protect. "I know this is uncomfortable, but I hope tonight can be handled with grace." Grace. I almost smiled at that word. In the Whitaker family, grace meant the wounded person should bleed quietly, so the person holding the knife would not be embarrassed. I had heard it at funerals, at business dinners, at holiday tables. Tonight it was aimed at me. Marcy leaned forward, her bracelets chiming against the table. "No one wants a scene," she said. "Grant has been under so much pressure. Sabrina too, honestly. I think everyone just wants to move forward like adults." I looked at her for 1 second too long and she blinked first. Sabrina too. That little phrase told me more than any confession could have. They had not just accepted her, they had made room for her pain before acknowledging mine. Grant placed his hand over Sabrina's for a moment, then withdrew it as if he had shown restraint. "Natalie and I have had a complicated year," he said. "I think we all know pretending doesn't help anyone." He spoke like a man delivering a boardroom update, smooth and measured, each sentence designed to sound reasonable to people who already wanted a reason to excuse him. He did not say I had spent that year wondering why our accounts had holes in them. A waiter came in with champagne. I watched the bubbles rise in my glass and thought about the first anniversary Grant and I ever celebrated at a cheap seafood place near Shem Creek, because we could not afford anything better. He had held my hand across the sticky table and said he didn't need a big life as long as it was honest. Back then, his father's construction company was drowning. Back then, he called me his anchor. I did not know anchors could be cut loose. I had paid the payroll loan once, then twice. I had sold my mother's old jewelry after she died and called it temporary help because Grant cried in our kitchen and said the company carried his father's name. I had spent nights building spreadsheets he never understood and mornings calling creditors who spoke to me like I was the only adult in the business. When the company survived, Grant called it a Whitaker comeback. He did not mention whose hands had pulled it out of the mud. Sabrina looked across the table at me. "Natalie," she said softly, "I don't want this to feel disrespectful." The sentence was so absurd I had to press my tongue against the roof of my mouth to stay quiet. She was sitting beside my husband at my anniversary dinner, wearing the delicate diamond bracelet I had seen on a company expense report listed as client appreciation. But she did not want it to feel disrespectful. Some people wanted forgiveness before they had even admitted the crime. Grant gave me a warning look. I knew that look. It appeared whenever I asked a question too precisely, whenever I remembered a date he wished I would forget, whenever I did not accept a polished lie on the first try. "Natalie," he said, lower, "now, this is hard for everyone." That was another trick. Make the wound communal. Spread the pain around until the person who was actually bleeding looked selfish for noticing the blood. I picked up my water glass and took a small sip. My hand did not shake. That surprised me. Maybe shock had frozen me into stillness, or maybe some part of me had been waiting for Grant to finally become careless enough to show the room who he was. For months, he had called me paranoid, cold, controlling. He had told me I saw betrayal because I wanted to be a victim. But there he was, sitting beside the woman he swore was just a marketing consultant. The private room had cream walls, dark wood, and a framed black and white photograph of Charleston Harbor behind Grant's chair. The table was dressed with white roses and gold chargers, the kind of details he never noticed unless someone important might see them. It looked like a celebration if you did not understand seating charts. It looked like a family dinner if you did not hear the words underneath every polite sentence. It looked like a photograph waiting to lie. Then the photographer arrived. He was young, nervous, dressed in black, carrying 2 cameras and a soft case. He looked from Grant to Sabrina to me and hesitated just long enough to prove he understood something was wrong. Grant stood immediately, all charm again. "Perfect timing," he said. "We'll do a family shot before dinner gets too far along." Family shot. My stomach tightened around those 2 words. He had not brought Sabrina there only to humiliate me. He had brought proof. A photograph can become a weapon in the hands of someone who cares more about appearance than truth. Grant wanted evidence that I had stood there calmly. He wanted a picture he could show business partners, family, friends, maybe even a judge someday, to suggest we were mature, cooperative, peaceful. He wanted my face beside his betrayal, softened by candlelight, edited into consent. If I cried, I was unstable. If I left, I was dramatic. If I smiled, he won. Diane dabbed the corner of her mouth with her napkin. "It would mean a lot to everyone if we could just have one nice picture," she said. She looked at me when she said everyone, as if I was outside that word. Marcy nodded quickly. "After everything Grant has been dealing with, we don't need more ugliness." I thought about how easily families confuse peace with obedience. They did not want healing, they wanted silence arranged nicely under warm lighting. Grant walked around the table toward me. He smelled like sandalwood, the same cologne I bought him for Christmas 2 years ago. He bent slightly, so only I could hear him, though I knew everyone was listening. "Don't make this ugly," he repeated. "Just smile for the family photo." His voice was soft, but there was steel underneath it. He was not asking. He was instructing me to participate in my own replacement. For 1 second the room blurred. Not from tears. From memory. Grant in our kitchen promising he would repay every dollar. Grant in our bedroom saying the late nights were for the company. Grant at his father's grave telling me he could not survive another loss. Grant last month calling me cruel because I asked why a Savannah hotel charge appeared the same weekend Sabrina posted a balcony view from Savannah. I had spent years translating his selfishness into stress. But the thing about working with records is that you learn a person's story is never just what they say in the room. It is what they leave behind. Dates, drafts, deleted emails that were forwarded before deletion, payment descriptions, metadata, voice memos with ordinary names. And in the side pocket of my purse under my lipstick and the folded program from my mother's funeral, my phone held a file labeled Insurance Memo. Grant had never known I had it. I looked at his hand on the back of Sabrina's chair. I looked at Diane's pearls, Marcy's tight smile, the photographer adjusting his lens because he was paid to capture what people wanted, remembered, not what was true. I thought about how many women had been told to be graceful while someone else rearranged their life in public. I thought about my mother telling me before she died, "Baby, quiet doesn't mean weak. Sometimes quiet means ready." Grant straightened and offered his hand like he was inviting me into the frame. Sabrina stood beside him, smoothing the front of her dress. Diane rose too satisfied, like the hardest part had passed. They all believed I would choose dignity, the way they defined it. They believed I would swallow the humiliation because I had swallowed so much before. That was Grant's greatest mistake. He thought my restraint belonged to him. The photographer lifted his camera. Grant placed one hand lightly on Sabrina's back and extended the other toward me, creating the perfect little triangle of a man, his future, and the wife expected to bless the arrangement. "Smile, Natalie," he said, louder this time for the whole room to hear. "This is still a family." I reached into my purse, unlocked my phone, and looked straight at him. For the first time that night, I let myself smile. 3 months before Grant asked me to smile beside his mistress, I found a hotel charge from Savannah, buried under a category labeled Client Hospitality. It was not the amount that caught my attention. Grant had spent more on dinners meant to impress men with soft hands and hard wallets. It was the date, April 17. The same morning he kissed my forehead in our kitchen and told me he would be in Columbia meeting a subcontractor about a municipal bid. I might have ignored it once if once had been all there was, but the charge sat beside a florist receipt, a jewelry boutique purchase, and 2 restaurant bills for tables of 2. The descriptions had been softened as if language could iron out guilt. Client gift, travel expense, appreciation dinner. Grant had always believed that if a lie sounded professional, it stopped being a lie. He forgot he had married a woman who read fine print for a living. That night, I sat at the kitchen island with my laptop open and the dishwasher humming behind me. Grant came home after 10, smelling faintly of cold air and someone else's perfume under his cologne. He loosened his tie, kissed my cheek, and asked why I looked so serious. I turned the laptop toward him and asked very calmly who the Savannah client was. For a second, only a second, his face emptied. Then he smiled, like I had disappointed him. "Natalie," he said, dragging my name out like a warning. "You're doing that thing again. That thing meant noticing. That thing meant remembering dates. That thing meant not accepting whatever story he handed me because he wore a wedding ring while saying it." He opened the refrigerator, took out a bottle of sparkling water, and told me the company had complicated accounts. He said I would know that if I didn't always assume the worst of him. I asked why a marketing consultant named Sabrina Wells had posted a photo from a Savannah hotel balcony the same afternoon. I did not raise my voice. I did not throw the printed statement at him. I simply turned my phone around and showed him the picture. Sabrina had cropped out whoever stood beside her, but a man's hand rested on the balcony rail. A hand wearing Grant's watch. The one I gave him after his father died. Grant stared at the screen, then laughed once through his nose. "So now you're stalking my employees?" he asked. It was a clever turn and he knew it. He did not deny the photo. He attacked the act of finding it. That was how Grant survived most conversations. He moved the spotlight from what he had done to how I had discovered it. If I defended myself, we stopped talking about him. I closed the laptop. "Are you having an affair with Sabrina?" I asked. He leaned both hands against the counter and looked at me with practiced sadness. "I'm not doing this tonight," he said. "You've been cold for months, Natalie. Everything is an investigation with you. Do you know how exhausting it is to be married to someone who treats you like a defendant?" I remember that sentence because it almost worked. Almost. There was a time I would have apologized. I would have softened my tone, explained why the receipts scared me, promised I was not trying to make him feel trapped. I had spent years making my pain presentable so Grant would not feel accused by it. But that night I saw something in his eyes. Not guilt, not fear. Calculation. He was measuring how much truth he could avoid by making me feel ashamed for asking. After he went upstairs, I reopened the laptop. I did not sleep. I downloaded statements from the business account, the joint account, the company card, and the line of credit I had once co-signed because Grant said the business would collapse without it. I put everything into folders by month. I did not call Sabrina. I did not scream at Grant in the hallway. I built a timeline. People underestimate quiet women because they confuse silence with confusion. The next week, I found the first draft. It came from the printer in our home office, the one Grant never used unless he was trying to avoid leaving a trace at work. 3 pages had jammed behind the tray. I pulled them free while looking for a tax form and saw my name in the center of the first paragraph. Natalie Ann Whitaker hereby agrees. My body went cold before my mind understood the words. It was not a business contract, it was a separation agreement. Not final, not signed, but detailed enough to show intent. The language was polite, sterile, almost tender in its cruelty. Both parties acknowledge the marriage has reached an amicable conclusion. Both parties agree to avoid public disparagement. Both parties waive future claims to business assets held solely under Whitaker Development Group or affiliated entities. Affiliated entities. That phrase pulsed on the page like a warning light. I read it standing barefoot on the office rug, still holding a laundry basket against my hip. Grant had written me out of money I had used to save his family company. Not money I imagined. Not emotional labor dressed up as debt. Real money. My mother's jewelry. My emergency savings. The second mortgage I agreed to because Grant wept into his hands and said his father's name would be ruined if the company failed. The agreement said I would leave the Charleston house with a modest settlement and no claim to any business growth after the date of separation. But we were not separated. Grant still slept in our bed when it suited him. He still let me host his clients at Christmas. He still asked me to review insurance clauses when his office manager got confused. He wanted all the benefits of a wife, until the paperwork needed me to become a stranger. I photographed every page. Then I put the sheets back exactly where I found them. That part mattered. Panic wants to announce itself. Strategy knows how to fold paper along the same crease. I spent my lunch break at work reviewing copies of old transfers. There it was again and again. My contributions had not gone directly into the company the way Grant had promised. Some went through accounts with names I did not recognize. Whitaker Holdings South, WDG Property Services, Palmetto Bridge LLC. They sounded legitimate enough to bore a tired wife. That was the point. But one address appeared on 2 filings, and it was the same address as Richard Vale's law office. I knew Richard. He had been at our wedding, standing beside Grant's uncle with a bourbon in his hand and a smile that never reached his eyes. Grant called him a family friend. I had learned to distrust that phrase. I did not confront Grant with the draft. Instead, I started saving everything. Emails he left open, calendar invitations, screenshots of messages before they disappeared, a voicemail from a bank officer asking him to confirm whether Mrs. Whitaker had approved a transfer. I had not. Each piece felt small alone, but together they formed a shape I recognized from work. Fraud rarely looked dramatic at first. It looked like paperwork filed by someone confident you would never read it. The recording happened on a Thursday evening in May. I remember because I had taken the day off to handle my mother's storage unit and I was too tired to make dinner. I left my tablet on the desk with my voice memo app running because I had been dictating reminders about insurance appeals. Grant came in while I was in the laundry room. He did not see the small red line pulsing at the top of the screen. His voice carried through the hallway, first low and irritated. "No, Richard, she hasn't seen the final version," he said. I stopped with a towel in my hands. There are moments when the body understands danger before the mind gives it a name. I moved closer to the office door, but did not step inside. Grant had his back to me, phone pressed to his ear, one hand rubbing the bridge of his nose. He said my name the way men say a problem they think they have solved. "Natalie won't fight if we frame it right. She cares too much about looking decent." Richard's voice was muffled, but I heard enough. Something about disclosure. Something about transfers. Something about risk if I retained counsel before signing. Grant laughed softly. "She won't. Her pride won't let her tell people she got played. She'll want it quiet." I stood in the hall, not breathing. I had known Grant was capable of lying. I had not known he was capable of studying my dignity and turning it into a weapon. Then Richard said something about the recording from their earlier meeting about it being a problem if discovered. "Maybe times." Grant's reply came clear as glass. "Then bury it. That's what I pay you for. I need her to sign before she knows about the transfer account." The towel slipped from my hands onto the floor. Grant did not turn. He was too busy arranging my erasure. He talked about Sabrina next, not with romance, not with devotion, but with convenience. "Sabrina looks better for the new chapter," he said. "She understands the image. Natalie never did." Then after a pause he added, "And Sabrina is easier to manage." That sentence would later do more damage than anything I could have said. When Grant left the office, I walked back to the laundry room and picked up the towel. I folded it. That sounds strange, I know. But sometimes the body clings to ordinary actions because the alternative is falling apart. Fold the towel. Breathe. Wait until the front door closes. Do not run. Do not cry where he can hear you. Do not become the unstable wife he has already written into his story. Only after his car pulled out of the driveway did I return to the office. The tablet was still recording. 26 minutes and 12 seconds. I saved the file with a neutral name because fear made me practical. Insurance memo. Then I sent it to my private email, an old account Grant did not know I still used. I uploaded a copy to cloud storage under my mother's maiden name. I saved another to a thumb drive and tucked it into the blue sewing tin she left me. That was when I cried. Not loudly, not beautifully. I sat on the floor beside the desk and pressed my fist against my mouth so hard my knuckles hurt. I cried for the woman who sold her mother's bracelet to make Grant's payroll. I cried for every dinner where I defended him to people who whispered that he was charming but careless. I cried because he had not just stopped loving me, he had decided I was useful to destroy. The next morning, Grant brought me coffee as if nothing had happened. He kissed the top of my head and told me he had a long day. I looked at his face and understood how dangerous calm people can be when they believe they control the room. He did not know I had his voice saved in 3 places. He did not know Richard's warning had given me the map. He did not know I had stopped hoping for honesty. For the next several weeks I watched. I answered when spoken to. I attended a company dinner and smiled beside Grant while Sabrina worked the room in a red dress, laughing too brightly at his jokes. I listened to Diane tell me marriage required flexibility. I let Marcy ask whether I had considered counseling, as if counseling could repair a man hiding assets while introducing his mistress to vendors. Every insult became easier once I knew the clock was running. I also met with an attorney named Elaine Porter, a woman with silver hair, sharp glasses, and no patience for decorative language. She listened to the recording once without interrupting. Then she took off her glasses and said, "Do not tell him what you have, do not sign anything, and do not attend any meeting where you are pressured without letting me know first." I asked if the recording mattered. She said, "Natalie, it matters a great deal." Still, some part of me waited for Grant to choose decency. That is the humiliating truth. Even with the file saved, even with the draft agreement photographed, even after hearing him laugh about my pride, I waited for the man I married to appear for 1 clean minute. I thought maybe guilt would catch up with him. Maybe shame would. Maybe 12 years would weigh something against Sabrina's perfume and his hunger for reinvention. Then, 2 days before our anniversary, Grant texted me while I was at work. "Dinner at 7, family photo at 8:30, please act mature." I stared at the message until the words lost shape. Not "would you like to talk?" Not "I owe you the truth." Not "I'm sorry." A location followed. A private room reservation. My anniversary had become a scheduled performance and I had been assigned my mark on the stage. I forwarded the message to Elaine. She replied within 5 minutes. "Bring your phone, keep your composure, leave if you feel unsafe." I read those lines 3 times. Then I opened the audio file and listened once more to Grant saying, "Then bury it." His voice no longer made me shake, it steadied me. By the time I zipped my navy dress on the night of that dinner, I understood exactly what Grant wanted from me. He did not want a wife. He wanted a witness who would pretend she had not seen the crime. By the time Grant said, "Smile, Natalie. This is still a family," the private dining room had gone so still I could hear the ice settling in Marcy's glass. His hand remained on Sabrina's back, gentle and possessive, the way a man touches something he wants the room to recognize as his. The photographer waited with his camera raised, halfway confused by the pause but too polite to lower it. Everyone looked at me like I was the obstacle between them and a clean picture. I did not answer Grant right away. I looked at the table first. The champagne flutes, the untouched bread, the white roses, the envelope he had placed near my plate like a bill for being discarded. It was strange what the mind noticed when the heart was being cornered. 1 petal had fallen beside my knife. A drop of condensation slid down Sabrina's water glass. Diane's fingers were wrapped so tightly around her pearls that her knuckles had gone pale. Sabrina shifted beside Grant. "Maybe we should give her a minute," she said softly, but her eyes betrayed her. She did not want to give me mercy. She wanted insurance. She wanted to look kind in front of the family, in case anyone later asked whether she had enjoyed watching a wife be replaced. Women like Sabrina understood optics too. Maybe that was why Grant liked her. She knew how to decorate cruelty with concern. Diane exhaled through her nose. "Natalie," she said, lowering her voice into that church basement softness I had heard from her whenever someone needed to be controlled. "I know you're hurt, but this is not the time to punish everyone." Everyone. Again that word stretched around the table and somehow skipped me. I was not everyone. I was the emotional weather they wanted to manage before it ruined the evening. I turned toward her. "Punish everyone?" I asked. My voice came out calm, almost too calm. Diane blinked, surprised I had spoken at all. "Yes," she said, recovering quickly. "Grant has made mistakes, but marriage is complicated. Families survive by choosing grace over resentment." Grant nodded, slightly pleased. He loved when other people said the ugly part for him. It made his hands look clean. Marcy set her glass down. "Mom's right," she said. "Nobody is saying this is easy for you. But Grant has been miserable for a long time, Natalie. And honestly, Sabrina has taken a lot of blame she doesn't deserve." The sentence landed, and for a moment I forgot to breathe. Sabrina, who sat at my anniversary dinner wearing a bracelet purchased from a company account I had helped rescue, was the one receiving sympathy. Grant stepped closer to me, still wearing the expression of a man trying to appear patient in front of witnesses. "Let's not do this," he said. "We agreed tonight would be respectful." I looked up at him. We agreed. The words were small, but they cut. He paused. A slight twitch moved through his jaw. He had said too much. For months he had spoken for both of us in rooms where I was not present. Now he had accidentally done it to my face. He recovered with a smile. "We discussed moving forward," he said. "Maybe not in these exact terms, but, you know, this marriage hasn't been healthy." That was the trick he had practiced in private. Take his affair, his hidden transfers, his lawyer's draft, and flatten it into a vague mutual sadness. We weren't betrayed and betrayer. We were unhealthy. We weren't wife and husband. We were transitioning. I almost admired the efficiency of it. Sabrina placed a hand lightly over her chest. "I never wanted to be the reason for pain," she said. Her voice trembled just enough to sound rehearsed by instinct rather than practice. "Grant told me you both understood things were ending." I looked at her, then really looked at her. The confidence in her face had begun to fracture, not completely. Just around the edges. For the first time I wondered how much of Grant's lie she had chosen to believe because it benefited her. "No," I said. "Grant told you what made this easier to swallow." Sabrina's eyes widened. Grant's head snapped toward me. Diane whispered my name like I had dropped a glass. But I kept my gaze on Sabrina. "That doesn't make you innocent," I said. "It just means you're not as special as he made you feel." Her face flushed. Grant took one step forward and I saw the anger break through his polished grief. "That's enough," he said. There it was. Not heartbreak, not remorse, authority. The voice he used with subcontractors who missed deadlines and employees who asked about checks. He leaned down toward me again, and the photographer finally lowered the camera. "You're embarrassing yourself." I had heard that sentence before in different forms. "You're overreacting. You're making this harder. You're creating a scene." Every version meant the same thing. Stop making my behavior visible. I stood. Not quickly. Not dramatically. I pushed my chair back, with both hands, careful not to let it scrape too loudly. That small control mattered to me. I would not give them a crash to point at later. Grant glanced toward the photographer, then back at me. The room had shifted. A second earlier they had been arranging me. Now they were waiting for me. That was the first time all night I felt the balance move. Grant's envelope still lay beside my plate. I picked it up and opened the flap. Inside were the papers I had expected, printed on heavy white paper, clipped with a silver binder clip like expensive stationery could make theft respectable. I turned to the signature page first. My name appeared beneath a sentence stating that I had reviewed all relevant financial disclosures and entered the agreement voluntarily. I almost laughed. Relevant disclosures. Voluntarily. 2 lies, stacked in one line. I looked at Grant. "Did Richard write this version before or after you moved the money?" His face changed before he could stop it. It was not big. Grant was too practiced for big reactions, but his eyes sharpened, and the skin around his mouth tightened. Diane noticed. Marcy noticed. Sabrina definitely noticed. The first crack in a lie is rarely loud. It is a silence in the wrong place. Grant gave a short laugh. Natalie, don't start throwing around things you don't understand. That sentence would have worked years ago, back when I still believed his confidence meant competence. But I had read the filings. I had the bank officer's voicemail. I had screenshots, drafts, transfers, dates. I had his own voice saying what he thought my pride would keep me from proving. I understand more than you planned for, I said. Diane stood now too. This is inappropriate, she said. Whatever financial disagreements you two have can be handled privately. Not by Grant's affair. Not by Sabrina's seat. Not by the envelope. By the possibility that someone outside the family might witness the ugliness they preferred to keep behind polished doors. That was always how reputation worked in families like the Whitakers. The sin was negotiable. The exposure was unforgivable. Grant reached for the envelope. I let him take it. He seemed relieved, as if removing the paper removed the facts. We're done here, he said quietly. You're upset. I understand. We'll talk tomorrow when you're rational. Rational. Another word men use when a woman's evidence makes them uncomfortable. Sabrina took a small step away from him, but he did not notice. He was focused entirely on me now, trying to pull the room back under his control. No, I said. We'll talk tonight. My fingers closed around my phone inside my purse. I felt the smooth edge of the case, the tiny weight of 3 months of restraint. I could hear Elaine Porter's voice in my head. Keep your composure. Do not sign anything. Leave if you feel unsafe. She had also told me one more thing before I left her office. If he tries to use witnesses to pressure you, remember that witnesses can hear more than one side. Grant's mouth curved into a tired smile, as if he had decided pity would play better than anger. Natalie, he said, loud enough for everyone. I know you're hurt, but bringing accusations into a family dinner won't change the fact that we need to move forward. He glanced at Sabrina, then at the photographer. Let's take the picture and give everyone a chance to breathe. He still thought the photograph could save him. That almost made me sad. The photographer lifted the camera again, uncertain. Diane moved beside Grant, forming the family cluster by muscle memory. Marcy joined reluctantly, her eyes darting between Grant and me. Sabrina hesitated, then stepped back into place at Grant's side, though her hand no longer touched his arm. Grant noticed that and pulled her closer with a firmness disguised as affection. He needed the picture. He needed the shape of the lie preserved before I ruined the lighting. I pulled out my phone. Grant's eyes dropped to it immediately. What are you doing? He asked. His voice had lost some of its warmth. I tapped the screen, once opening the file list. Insurance memo sat between grocery notes and a dictated work reminder, plain and harmless. The ordinary names steadied me. People like Grant expected proof to arrive in dramatic folders, stamped envelopes, courtrooms. They forgot that the truth can hide in something boring until it is ready. There's something everyone should hear before we take that picture, I said. Diane's face tightened. Natalie, no, she said, as if she already knew enough to be afraid. Marcy whispered. What is that? Sabrina looked from me to Grant. He did not answer her. That was when fear entered her face for real. Not guilt, not embarrassment. Fear of realizing the man beside her had a room in his life she had never been allowed to see. Grant stepped toward me. Put the phone away. No softness now, no family language. Just command. I looked at him and remembered him standing at his father's grave, trembling while I held his hand. I remembered believing I could save a man by loving him through his fear. But fear left untreated can become greed. Grief can become entitlement. And a person who is rescued without gratitude can start to believe rescue is something he is owed. I moved away from the table, closer to the wall where the room's small Bluetooth speaker sat on a sideboard under a vase of roses. Grant had rented the room often enough that I knew the setup. He used it for speeches, client dinners, holiday toasts. He loved amplified sincerity. Earlier, before Sabrina arrived, the waiter had asked if we needed music, and Grant had connected his phone to test the speaker. His mistake was leaving the device discoverable. My phone found the speaker in 2 seconds. Connected. The word appeared quietly at the top of my screen. Grant saw it. His face drained. Natalie, he said, and this time my name was not a warning. It was a plea, wearing a warning's clothes. I held the phone at my side. You wanted a family moment, I said. So let's have one. The room did not breathe. Even the photographer stood frozen, camera hanging from his hand. Diane reached for Grant's arm. What is she talking about? She asked. Grant did not look at her. Sabrina did. Marcy's hand went to her mouth. I realized then that no one in that room, Not even the people who had helped corner me knew the whole story. They knew the affair. They knew the transition. They knew enough to excuse the parts that benefited Grant, but they did not know what he had done underneath it. That was why he had dared to bring me here. He thought his family's partial knowledge gave him protection. He thought because they had accepted Sabrina they would accept everything else. He thought if he made the betrayal public first, any truth I told afterward would sound like revenge. And maybe it would have if I had only brought anger. But I had not brought anger. I had brought his voice. I looked at Sabrina one last time before pressing play. "You may want to listen carefully," I said. Her lips parted but no words came out. Grant lunged half a step, then stopped when Paul, his cousin, stood from the far end of the table. Paul did not touch him. He did not need to. The movement was enough to remind Grant that there were witnesses now, and witnesses change what powerful men believe they can get away with. My thumb hovered over the screen. For one strange second, I felt the old instinct rise in me. Protect him. Protect the room. Protect the name on the door, the mother clutching pearls, the sister who had chosen comfort over truth. Protect the man who once cried in your kitchen and called you his anchor. Then I looked at the envelope in his hand and thought of my signature line waiting beneath a lie. The instinct died. "Before we take a family photo," I said, my voice steady enough to frighten even me, "your family should hear how you tried to erase me." Grant whispered my name once more, small and sharp. I pressed play. The speaker clicked, hissed, and then his recorded laughter filled the private dining room. Grant's recorded laugh sounded different through the speaker. Thinner, meaner. Without his expensive suit and careful eyes attached to it, the sound had nowhere to hide. "Natalie won't fight if we frame it right," his voice said. "She cares too much about looking decent." Nobody moved. Diane's fingers froze against her pearls. Sabrina stared at Grant as if she had just realized the man beside her had been speaking a language she did not understand. The recording continued. Richard Vale's voice came next, lower and harder to hear but clear enough. "If she gets independent counsel before signing the transfers, become a problem." Then Grant again, irritated, almost bored. "She won't. Her pride won't let her tell people she got played." My face burned, but I did not look away. I wanted them to hear that part. I wanted them to understand that he had not simply betrayed me. He had studied my shame. Grant lunged for the phone. Paul stepped between us without saying a word. That surprised everyone, including me. Paul had spent most of dinner pretending his menu contained salvation, but now he stood with one hand lifted, not touching Grant, just blocking him. "Don't," Paul said quietly. Grant's face twisted. For 1 second all the polish fell off him. He looked like a man who had reached for a switch and found out the lights belonged to someone else. "Turn it off," Grant said. "Not please, not Natalie. Just an order." The recording answered him instead. "I need her to sign before she knows about the transfer account," his voice said through the speaker. Sabrina's head snapped toward him. Diane whispered, "Transfer account?" Marcy sat down slowly as if her knees had stopped believing in the family version of events. The envelope in Grant's hand bent under the pressure of his grip. Richard's voice came again, warning him about disclosure, marital funds, and the danger of linking the affiliated entities too closely. Grant cut him off in the recording. "Then bury it. That's what I pay you for." The room changed at those words. It was not just an affair anymore. It was not heartbreak, not incompatibility, not a complicated transition. It was planning. It was concealment. It was a man trying to turn his wife's dignity into a legal strategy. Diane looked at me then, and for the first time all night, her expression held something close to fear. Not regret. Fear. There is a difference. Regret reaches for the person hurt. Fear looks for the exit. "Natalie," she said, "we don't need to hear private legal matters in a restaurant." I almost laughed. She had been willing to stage my humiliation under candlelight, but the truth required privacy. The cruelty could be public. The evidence had to whisper. I let the recording play. Grant's voice shifted smoother now, the voice he used when convincing himself he was reasonable. "Sabrina looks better for the new chapter," he said. Sabrina went completely still. She understands the image. Natalie never did. A pause. Then the final line, softer and uglier than the rest. "And Sabrina is easier to manage." Sabrina pulled her hand away from his arm so quickly it was almost a flinch. For the first time that night I felt something like pity for her. Not forgiveness, not absolution. Pity. She had walked into my anniversary dinner believing she was the chosen woman, the proof of Grant's rebirth. But in his private voice, she was not love. She was branding. She was compliance wrapped in silk. Her eyes filled, but she did not cry. Maybe she was too proud. Maybe she had just learned pride was something Grant knew how to use. Grant found his voice again. "That's out of context," he said. The sentence was so weak it seemed to embarrass even him. "Natalie has been recording me illegally twisting things, making this into something it isn't." He looked around the room, searching for the old loyalty. Diane's eyes dropped. Marcy would not meet his gaze. Paul stayed where he was. The photographer stood in the corner, pale and silent, holding a camera that suddenly seemed heavier than evidence. I stopped the recording. The silence after it felt louder than Grant's voice had been. Then I opened my purse and took out the folder I had brought, folded inside a plain black portfolio. I had not wanted to use it. Some part of me had hoped the recording alone would be enough, that hearing him would make the room understand. But people who live on reputation are skilled at calling sound a misunderstanding. Paper is harder to charm. I placed the first document on the table. "This is the transfer from our joint line of credit into WDG Property Services," I said. My voice sounded like it belonged to someone who had slept 8 hours and eaten breakfast, not someone whose marriage was being dismantled between champagne and white roses. "This is the company Grant told me was only for vendor payments. It shares a mailing address with Richard Vale's office." Grant said my name, but I kept going. I placed down the next page. "This is the first draft of the separation agreement. It says I voluntarily waive future claims to affiliated entities." Another page. "This is the bank voicemail asking Grant whether I approved a transfer I had never seen." Another. "This is the spreadsheet showing the money I put into Whitaker Development after his father died." The table that had been set for celebration became an exhibit. Marcy covered her mouth. "Grant," she whispered. It was the first time she had said his name like an accusation instead of a defense. Diane sat down hard in her chair. Sabrina stared at the bracelet on her wrist. The diamond one. The one marked Client Appreciation in a file. Grant never expected me to read. Slowly, as if it had burned her, she unclasped it and placed it on the table beside the papers. Grant looked at the bracelet, then at Sabrina. "Don't be dramatic," he snapped. "It was the wrong thing to say." She laughed once, a small broken sound. "You brought me here to stand beside you while you robbed your wife," she said. Grant's face reddened. "That is not what this is." But even Sabrina did not believe him anymore. That was the problem with exposing a liar in front of people he has lied to differently. Everyone starts comparing versions. Diane found her voice again brittle and small. "Natalie, surely this can still be handled quietly, quietly." There it was, the family's holiest word. Quietly, as if silence could make theft less real. Quietly, as if my humiliation had not been arranged with a photographer and a reservation. Quietly, as if every woman in that room had not been asked at some point to protect a man from the sound of his own choices. "No," I said. I did not say it loudly. I did not need to. Grant brought me here tonight because he wanted witnesses. Now he has them. I looked at the photographer, who seemed ready to disappear into the wallpaper. "You don't have to stay," I told him. He nodded, once grateful and shaken, then stepped into the hallway. The door closed softly behind him. The family photo Grant wanted never happened. That felt right. Grant leaned toward me, lowering his voice again, trying one last time to make the room smaller. "Think very carefully about what you're doing," he said. "You release this, you hurt everyone." I looked at him for a long moment. 12 years sat between us. The cheap seafood place, the payroll loans, his father's funeral, my mother's jewelry. The nights I believed exhaustion was intimacy because we were surviving something together. Then I saw the envelope in his hand. "You already hurt everyone," I said. "I'm just done being the place you hide it." I took off my wedding ring. My finger looked strange without it, pale and slightly indented, as if the marriage had left a physical memory behind. I placed the ring beside the unsigned agreement. Metal against paper? Promise beside trap. "I won't sign this tonight. I won't protect your reputation. And I won't smile for a lie." Nobody stopped me when I picked up my portfolio. Sabrina had moved to the far side of the table, away from Grant. Diane stared down at the documents like they might rearrange themselves into something less damning. Marcy was crying quietly, though I did not know whether it was for me, Grant, or the family story collapsing in real time. Grant stood rigid, his face full of fury he could not spend because too many people had finally seen the bill. I walked out before dessert arrived. In the hallway, the restaurant sounded normal. Silverware touched plates. Someone laughed near the bar. A birthday candle flickered at a nearby table. It shocked me how ordinary the world remained while one life ended. Outside, Charleston air wrapped around me warm and damp. I stood under the restaurant awning and breathed like I had been underwater for months. My phone buzzed twice. Grant calling, then Diane. I declined both. Elaine Porter answered on the second ring. I told her I had played the recording. I told her there were witnesses. I told her Grant tried to take the phone but had not touched me. She listened without interrupting. Then she said, "Go home, lock the door and send me everything you placed on that table." Her voice was steady, practical, exactly what I needed. Some people call that cold. I call it a rope thrown to someone in deep water. By midnight, the copies were in Elaine's inbox. By morning, Richard Vale had sent a formal notice that he no longer represented Grant in any matter involving me. He called it a conflict. I called it survival. Sabrina disappeared from social media for 3 weeks. The last thing she posted before going quiet was a blurred photo of the bracelet sitting on a white tablecloth, no caption. I never knew whether it was remorse or self-pity. I stopped caring. Grant's family called for days. Diane left messages that began with "sweetheart" and ended with warnings about ruining the Whitaker name. Marcy texted that she was sorry I had been hurt, but asked whether I truly needed to involve financial investigators. Paul sent one message only. "I'm sorry I didn't stand sooner." That one I answered. "Thank you," I wrote. Nothing more. Gratitude did not require a reunion. The divorce did not become clean, but it became honest. That was enough. Once Elaine filed the right motions, Grant's polished language lost its shine. The affiliated entities were reviewed. The transfer account was documented. The money I had put into Whitaker development after his father died was no longer treated like a gift I had imagined. Grant did not lose everything, because real life is not that neat, but he lost the power to decide what I was allowed to know. He also lost the house as a bargaining chip. The Charleston home could not be moved through paper shadows once the paper shadows had names. My mother's jewelry money, the second mortgage, the emergency funds, the loan guarantees, all of it became part of the negotiation. Grant sat across from me once in a conference room and looked smaller than I remembered. Not sorry. Smaller. There are men who do not regret the harm, they only regret the failure of the plan. He tried one final time to speak to me alone in the courthouse hallway after a settlement conference. "Natalie," he said, "we loved each other once." I looked at him and waited for the old ache to rise. It did, but faintly, like music from another room. "Yes," I said. "And then you tried to make me pose beside the woman you replaced me with, so you could steal from me politely." He looked away first. Weeks later, an email arrived from the photographer. He apologized for the delay and said he had found one usable image from the evening before everything became uncomfortable. That was the word he used. Uncomfortable. I opened the attachment against my better judgment. There we were, Grant smiling with perfect confidence, Sabrina standing close but not yet broken. Diane and Marcy arranged behind them, faces prepared for legacy. And me at the edge of the frame, one hand inside my purse. I stared at my own face for a long time. I expected to see humiliation. Maybe fear. But the woman in the picture looked calm in a way I barely remembered feeling. Her eyes were fixed on the camera, not pleading, not performing. She looked like someone standing at the end of a long hallway, one hand already on the door. I saved the photo, but I did not post it. I did not need applause from strangers to make the truth real. I printed one copy and placed it in a plain envelope with no label. Then I put it in the bottom drawer of my desk beneath my mother's old sewing tin. The thumb drive was still there, though I no longer needed to hide it. I kept both anyway. Not because I wanted to live inside the injury, but because memory matters. There are days healing feels like forgetting. It is not. Healing is remembering without handing the past the keys. I sold the house the following spring. Not because Grant had ruined it, though for a while I thought he had. I sold it because the rooms had become crowded with versions of me I no longer wanted to care for. The woman checking receipts at midnight. The woman apologizing for reasonable questions. The woman folding towels while her husband planned her erasure in the next room. I thanked those women, then I let them leave. My new apartment was smaller with morning light, and no dining room large enough for a family performance. I bought a round table that seated 4. The first time Elaine came over for coffee, she laughed at the size of it and said, "No room for ambushes." She was right. I had spent years making space for people who mistook my patience for permission. Now I kept only the chairs I wanted filled. Sometimes people ask if I forgave Grant. They ask carefully, like forgiveness is the final exam of womanhood and I am expected to pass gracefully. I tell them the truth. I do not carry him every day. I do not rehearse arguments in the shower. I do not check Sabrina's life or Diane's messages, but forgiveness, if it ever comes, will not be a performance I offer to make other people comfortable. I have already done enough smiling for lies. What I learned is simple, but it cost me dearly. Love without respect becomes theater. Family without accountability becomes a cover story. And silence when demanded by the person who hurt you is not peace. It is a room with no air. For 12 years I thought being a good wife meant protecting the marriage from embarrassment. Now I know a marriage that can only survive through your humiliation is already gone. Grant wanted one photograph to prove I accepted my replacement. Instead, he created the moment I stopped protecting him. He wanted me framed beside his new life, smiling gently, while he buried mine under legal language and family pressure. But some truths do not stay buried because the person who holds them is weak. They stay buried until she decides the room is finally ready to hear them. That night, my husband brought his mistress to our anniversary dinner and asked me to smile for the family photo. So I played the recording his lawyer tried to bury, and for the first time in years the picture told the truth.